Welcome back to the deep dive. Ever find yourself asking, what if? Like, what if I'd done that differently?
We all do it.
Well, today we're exploring a world where what if is more than just a passing thought. It's a core tool. We're talking about thought experiments.
Exactly. These amazing imaginative scenarios thinkers use to grapple with really big ideas,
Mm.
especially when, you can't just run a test in a lab.
Think of them like mental laboratories.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah,
Right.
you build this hypothetical situation, sometimes push it to the extreme, and just see where the logic takes you.
So our mission today, using the essay Imagining the Impossible as our guide,
Yeah.
is to unpack some really fascinating, sometimes, frankly, weird thought experiments.
And see how these mental games help us understand everything from, say, ethics to maybe even what reality is.
The sources cover a lot of ground: ethics, consciousness, reality, identity, science, decision-making. It's quite a mix.
It is. And we'll meet, runaway trolleys, maybe cats that are alive and dead at the same time.
Philosophical butterflies.
Dreaming butterflies, yeah. And scenarios that might genuinely make you wonder if this is real.
Yeah, these aren't just abstract ideas locked away in philosophy departments. They could really challenge how you think.
They get you involved. That's the key. They put you right in the middle of the scenario.
Okay, let's start with ethics and morality. These are designed to put you in a tight spot, morally speaking.
Right. To test your intuitions, make you clarify what you really value.
And the absolute classic here has to be the trolley problem.
You can't avoid it. Philippa Fitz started it. Judith Jarvis Thompson really ran with it.
Right, the setup is brutal. A runaway trolley, 5 workers on the track ahead, they can't get out of the way.
But you're standing by a lever.
You pull the lever, the trolley switches to another track where there's only 1 worker. So pull the lever. Kill 1, save 5. Do nothing. Kill 5, save none.
It's designed for maximum conflict, isn't it? Pulling the lever seems logical. Utilitarians save the most lives.
It feels different, right? Actively causing someone's death.
Exactly. That gut feeling often pushes back. It highlights that tension between, maximizing good outcomes versus sticking to moral rules like don't kill. Foote explored things like the doctrine of double effect here.
The idea that maybe an action's okay if the bad outcome is just a foreseen side effect, not the intended goal.
Something like that, yeah. It gets complicated fast.
And this isn't just a thought puzzle anymore.
Yeah.
It's out in the real world.
Oh, absolutely. It's used in moral psychology research, but maybe more critically, it's informing the ethics programming for self-driving cars.
Right. What does the car do in a no-win crash scenario?
It's a real-time trolley problem. Swerve and hit one person to avoid 5. Protect the passenger at all costs. MIT's Moral Machine Project actually crowdsourced opinions on this from millions of people.
Wow.
Yeah, shows how thinking through this stark imaginary choice helps map out our real-world values for tough decisions.
Okay, sticking with ethics, but a different feel. Peter Singer's Drowning Child. Seems simpler on the surface.
Deceptively simple. Imagine you're walking past a shallow pond. You see a small child drowning. Easy for you to wade in and save them. But you're wearing brand new, really expensive shoes and clothes. Saving the child means ruining them. Do you have an obligation to save the child?
Well, yeah, of course. Who wouldn't? Shoes versus a life. It's no contest.
Everyone says yes. And that's Simmer's point. He then asks, if you'd sacrifice, say, a few $100s worth of shoes to save a life right in front of you, why don't we feel the same obligation to sacrifice similar amounts, maybe money we'd spend on luxuries, to save lives far away through effective charities?
So distance shouldn't matter morally.
Huh.
Or the number of people.
That was his argument in Famine, Affluence, and Morality. It tries to connect that strong, immediate empathy we feel for the child in the pond to the more abstract idea of global suffering.
Makes it harder to ignore, framing it like that.
Definitely. It challenged a lot of assumptions about charity and responsibility, and it was a big inspiration for the effective altruism movement. It's about bridging that gap between immediate feeling and abstract moral calculation.
Okay, shifting scale now. From individual choices to designing a whole society. John Rawls and the Veil of Ignorance.
A giant in political philosophy. From his book, A Theory of Justice, he asks you to imagine you're in this initial setup, the original position.
Okay.
Your job is to agree on the basic principles of justice for a new society. But here's the twist. You're behind a veil of ignorance,
Meaning?
meaning you have no idea who you will be in that society. Your race, gender, class, talents, health, wealth, all unknown. You're choosing the rules without knowing where you'll end up.
So you could be the richest person or the poorest, the most talented or the least.
Exactly. Rawls argued that if you're rational and self-interested, but ignorant of your own future place, you'd choose principles that protect everyone, especially the worst off, because you might end up being worst off.
So you'd likely choose things like equal basic rights, maybe some kind of social safety net.
That's the idea. Things like equal liberties, fair opportunity, and arranging inequalities so they benefit the least advantaged members of society, the famous difference principle. It's a thought experiment designed to force impartiality.
By removing your own bias from the equation.
Right. And you can use this yourself, when thinking about a policy, say healthcare or taxes, ask, what would I choose if I didn't know how it would affect me personally?
That's a useful mental check.
It is, and studies suggest it works. People tend to make more equitable choices when prompted like this. It's influenced countless debates on justice and equality worldwide.
Okay, now for something a bit more out there. Robert Nozick's utility monster.
Ah! Yeah, this one's designed to poke holes in a specific ethical theory, classical utilitarianism.
The idea that we should maximize total happiness.
Right. Maximize the overall sum of happiness or utility in the world. Nozick says, okay, imagine there's a being the utility monster who gets, vastly more happiness from any resource than anyone else. Give it a cookie, it gets 1,000,000 units of pleasure. Give the same cookie to a normal person, they get 1 unit.
Oh, I see where this is going.
If your only goal is maximizing the total happiness sum,
You should give everything to the monster.
everything. Cookies, clean water, attention, everything. Even if everyone else is left with nothing and is miserable, because that one monster's astronomical happiness outweighs everyone else's suffering in the final tally.
Which seems obviously wrong, morally speaking.
That's Nozick's point. It suggests that maybe morality isn't just about the total sum of happiness, maybe how happiness or the reasons that create it are distributed also matters.
So it's a critique of focusing only on the aggregate, ignoring fairness or individual rights.
Exactly. It cautions against simplistic calculations. We don't have literal utility monsters, but you see echoes in debates about, say, extreme wealth concentration or policies that boost overall GDP but hurt vulnerable groups. Is maximizing the total always the right goal if the distribution is horrific?
These ethical ones are really effective at revealing hidden tensions in our thinking.
They force you to confront the consequences of your principles when pushed to extremes.
Okay, so we've wrestled with right and wrong. What about the mind itself? The thing doing the wrestling. Let's talk consciousness and mind.
Right, this is where thought experiments get really strange sometimes. Exploring what consciousness is, if machines could have it, subjective experience.
And a heavyweight here is John Searle's Chinese Room.
Yeah, from 1980. This was a direct attack on what Searle called strong AI.
Which is the idea that
running the right computer program is basically the same thing as having a mind, having genuine understanding.
Okay, so what's the scenario?
Imagine someone who doesn't understand a word of Chinese are locked in a room. Slips of paper with Chinese characters come in through a slot. You have a massive rule book in English that tells you exactly which Chinese symbols to output in response to the input symbols. You just follow the rules, manipulating symbols based on their shape.
So from the outside, someone sending in questions in Chinese and getting coherent answers back would think the person inside understands Chinese.
Looks like it, right? You're passing the Turing test, basically. But you, inside the room, you're just shuffling symbols according to rules. You have no idea what any of it means. You understand the syntax, the rules for symbol manipulation, but not the semantics, the meaning.
And Searle says a computer running a program is just like the person in the room.
Exactly. It's just manipulating symbols based on rules no matter how complex. It doesn't understand. Therefore, computation alone isn't sufficient for understanding or consciousness.
That's a huge challenge to AI, especially now with large language models that seem so fluent.
It remains a central debate. Are today's AIs just incredibly sophisticated Chinese rooms? It forces us to ask what understanding really entails beyond symbol manipulation. There are replies, of course, like maybe the whole system room, person, book understands, but the core intuition is powerful.
Okay, another classic about the mind. Mary's Room. This one's about subjective experience.
Frank Jackson, 1982. Imagine Mary, a super brilliant neuroscientist. She knows literally every physical fact there is to know about color vision. Physics of light, neurobiology, brain states, all of it.
She knows it all intellectually.
And here's the catch, she's lived her entire life in a completely black and white room. She's never actually seen color.
Okay.
Then one day the door opens and she walks out and sees a red tomato for the first time. Jackson asks, does Mary learn something new?
Well, intuitively, yes. The experience of what it's like to see red seems new.
Exactly. If she learns something new, this subjective quality, this qualia of redness, after already knowing all the physical facts, then the conclusion seems to be that not all facts are physical facts. There's something more to conscious experience than just the physical stuff.
Which challenges physicalism, the idea that everything is ultimately physical.
Right. It's often called the knowledge argument against physicalism. It highlights the hard problem of consciousness. How does physical processing give rise to subjective feeling? How do you get the what it's like from just neurons firing?
Can science ever fully capture that subjective quality?
That's the question it provokes. Jackson himself later changed his view, arguing she doesn't learn a new fact but gains a new ability. But the thought experiment itself powerfully captures that feeling, that subjective experience is something special, something perhaps beyond physical description alone.
And Thomas Nagel tackled that what it's like idea from a different angle with bats, right?
Yeah, his famous 1974 essay, What Is It Like to Be a Bat? He asks you to try and imagine the subjective experience of a bat.
Which perceives the world mainly through echolocation, sonar.
Right. You can try to imagine what it would be like for you to fly, hang upside down, use sonar, but Nagel argues you can't really imagine what it's like for the bat to be a bat from its own unique batty perspective.
Because our consciousness is so tied to our human senses and way of being.
Precisely. We're limited by our own type of mind. We can objectively describe a bat's behavior and neurophysiology, but its subjective world, the what its likeness of being a bat, is fundamentally inaccessible to us.
It shows the limits of trying to reduce consciousness just to objective facts.
It does. It emphasizes the inherently subjective first-person nature of conscious experience, a landmark piece that reminds us of the gap between knowing about something and knowing what it's like. And it applies to understanding other humans too, acknowledging the uniqueness of their inner worlds.
Let's reach way back for our last one in this section. Avicenna's Floating Man from the 11th century.
Ibn Sina, yeah. An incredibly early thought experiment about self-awareness. He asks you to imagine a person created fully formed, but suspended in a void.
Okay.
Crucially, they have no sensory input whatsoever. No sight, sound, touch. They can't even feel their own body or limbs. And they have no memories.
Complete sensory deprivation. Would they know they exist?
Avicenna argued yes. Even without any input from the world or the body, this floating man would still be directly aware of their own consciousness, their own being.
So self-awareness is innate, not dependent on senses or body.
That was his conclusion. He used it to argue for an immaterial soul or self distinct from the body. It's fascinating because it predates Descartes' I think, therefore I am by centuries, but it's tackling a similar core intuition about the certainty of one's own awareness.
What remains if you strip everything else away?
Right. It forces you to contemplate the bare essence of consciousness, a testament to how long humans have pondered the mystery of the self.
From the mind's nature to the nature of reality itself. What if the world around us isn't what it seems? Let's dive into reality and perception.
Yeah, these thought experiments often deploy radical doubt. They posit these extreme scenarios of illusion or deception to test how we know anything at all about the external world.
And the cornerstone here is Plato's allegory of the cave. Ancient, but everyone knows it.
From the Republic. Prisoners chained in a cave facing a wall, seeing only shadows cast by objects carried behind them, lit by a fire.
And they think the shadows are reality.
Because it's all they've ever known. Then one prisoner gets free, is dragged out into the sunlight, sees the real objects, the real world. It's painful, confusing at first.
But eventually they understand the cave was an illusion.
Right. But when they go back to tell the others, the remaining prisoners don't believe them. They're comfortable with the shadows. They might even attack the one who tries to free them.
It's a powerful metaphor. Our perceived reality might just be shadows of a deeper truth.
That's the core idea. Education is the difficult journey out of the cave, towards enlightenment. It's a timeless warning against clinging to comforting illusions.
And it still feels relevant today, thinking about filter bubbles, echo chambers online.
Absolutely. People mistaking mediated experiences for the real thing.
Yeah.
And its influence on culture is huge. The Matrix is basically a sci-fi retelling of the cave. It's that fundamental question, could reality be more than what meets the eye?
Okay, let's travel east for another classic challenge to reality. Zhuangzi's butterfly dream.
From 4th century BCE China, a beautiful, simple story. Zhuangzi says he dreamed he was a butterfly, fluttering around, totally happy, completely unaware of being Zhuangzi.
Just being a butterfly.
Then he wakes up, and he's bewildered. He asks, was I Zhuangzi dreaming I was a butterfly, or am I now a butterfly dreaming I am Zhuangzi?
It really blurs that line between dream and waking life.
It does. How can you be sure which state is real? When you're dreaming, it feels completely real. So couldn't this waking state just be another kind of dream? It's a lovely poetic expression of skepticism about the certainty of our perceptions.
It suggests reality might be more fluid than we think.
Yeah, and it encourages a kind of openness and wonder. Maybe our common sense reality is just one mode. It predates Western skeptical arguments like Descartes' dream argument. And again, you see its spirit in modern stories like Inception that play with layers of reality.
All right, let's bring skepticism into the modern technological age with the brain in a vat.
This one really updates Descartes' evil demon idea for the computer era, popularized by Hilary Putnam.
The setup.
Imagine you're not actually reading this or listening to this with ears and eyes. You are, in fact, just a brain, floating in a vat of liquid in some lab.
Okay, not a pleasant thought.
And your nerve endings are hooked up to a supercomputer that's feeding you all your sensory experiences. It's simulating this entire world, your body, your interactions perfectly.
So if the simulation is flawless,
How would you ever know? You couldn't. From inside the simulation, it would feel exactly like reality.
this is the ultimate skeptical nightmare.
It really is. It distills the problem. All our information about the world comes through our senses and brain. If those could be perfectly manipulated, then our whole perceived reality could be an illusion. We can't step outside our own experience to check.
So it forces us to ask, how do we justify our belief in an external world at all?
That's the epistemological challenge. It's not really claiming we are brains in vats, but showing the potential gap between our experience and reality. And with VR getting better and people like Elon Musk talking about simulation theory, it feels less purely philosophical than it used to.
Which brings us neatly to Nick Bostrom's simulation argument.
Right, this one's a bit different. It's less about how could you tell and more about probability. Bostrom's from 2003.
What's the argument?
He starts with a couple of assumptions. First, that it's possible for a technologically mature civilization to create very realistic simulations of their ancestors, or universes like ours, complete with conscious beings inside.
Okay. Seems plausible eventually.
Second, that such civilizations would likely run many such simulations, maybe for research or even entertainment. If both those are true,
Then simple statistics would suggest.
that the overwhelming majority of conscious minds like ours would be inside simulations, not in the original base reality.
So he concludes we're probably in a simulation.
He argues one of three things must be true. One, civilizations like ours almost always go extinct before reaching that simulation-capable stage. Two, advanced civilizations, for some reason, choose not to run these simulations. Or three, we are almost certainly living in a simulation right now.
That's quite a conclusion,
Yep.
based purely on probability and future potential.
Yeah, it sparked a lot of debate. It's not a proof, but a provocative argument based on projecting current trends. It challenges our default assumption of being in the real reality. Some physicists and philosophers take it quite seriously, debating the odds. It makes you think.
From questioning reality to questioning the self, what makes you you over time, or maybe even through copies? Let's look at identity in the self.
Right. These thought experiments probe our notion of personal identity. What makes you the same person today as you were yesterday? Is it your body, your memories? Something else. They use extreme scenarios to test our intuitions.
The classic starting point is the ship of Theseus.
An ancient Greek paradox. Imagine a famous ship, the ship of Theseus. Over time, as it sails, its wooden planks decay and are replaced one by one. Eventually, every single original plank has been replaced with a new one.
Is it still the same ship?
That's the first question. It looks the same, functions the same, has the same name and history, but none of the original matter. Then, the twist. Suppose someone collected all the old original planks and reassembled them into a second ship.
Now you have two ships. Which one is the real ship of Theseus?
Exactly. The one with the continuous history and form, or the one with the original material? The paradox shows our concept of identity is fuzzy. There's no easy answer.
It applies to us too, right? Our cells replace themselves constantly.
Totally. Are you the same physical object you were 7 years ago? It forces us to think about whether identity lies in material substance or structure or continuity of function or maybe psychological continuity. We use different criteria in different contexts.
Okay, let's get more sci-fi with the teleportation paradox. Derek Perfett used this one a lot.
Think Star Trek Transporter, but with a darker twist. A machine scans you perfectly, atom by atom. It destroys the original you.
Ouch.
Then it transmits the information to, say, Mars, where an identical body is assembled using new atoms, but based on your exact pattern. This copy wakes up with all your memories, personality, feeling like they just teleported.
From the outside, it looks like successful travel.
Yeah.
But did you travel?
Or did you die, and a perfect replica, a new person who just thinks they're you, was created on Mars? It hits right at our gut feeling of continuous existence.
What if the original isn't destroyed? Then you have two of you.
Now it gets even weirder. Parfit argued that maybe what matters isn't strict identity, is this me, but psychological continuity, the continuation of memories, beliefs, intentions. He thought our focus on a single enduring self might be mistaken.
This feels super relevant for things like potential mind uploading in the future.
Exactly. Would a digital copy of your mind be you, or just a simulation, or cloning? How much physical change can you undergo before you're not the same person? It forces us to confront what we really mean by personal identity. Is it the body, the mind stream, both? Neither.
And then there's Davidson's Swamp Man, which adds another layer to this copying idea.
Donald Davidson, 1987. Imagine you're hiking in a swamp, lightning strikes, instantly vaporizing you. Gone. But by sheer unbelievable coincidence, at the exact same instant, lightning strikes a nearby patch of swamp muck, and the molecules spontaneously rearrange themselves into an exact physical replica of you, atom for atom.
Swamp Man.
Swamp Man. Looks like you, same brain structure, walks out of the swamp, goes home, seems to have all your memory, interacts with your friends and family perfectly normally.
Physically identical. But is it you? Or even a person?
Davidson argued no. Despite the physical identity, Swamp Man lacks the crucial history. Your memories, beliefs, the meanings of your words, they have meaning because they were formed through actual causal interactions with the world. Swamp Man's memories just popped into existence with the structure. They aren't connected to any actual past experiences.
So origin and history matter for meaning and maybe even personhood.
That was Davidson's point. It challenges definitions of identity based purely on current internal states. It suggests that being a person involves having a genuine history, a narrative grounded in reality. It's another angle on the teleporter problem, emphasizing the importance of causal connection to the world for our mental states to be authentic.
These identity puzzles really mess with your head. They show how complex being the same person actually is.
They definitely reveal the limits of our everyday concepts when pushed.
Okay, let's switch tracks to science and physics. How do thought experiments work there? Often called Gedanken experiments.
Right. Scientists use these when actual experiments are impossible, too expensive, or maybe even unethical. They use imagination and logic to explore theories, predict outcomes, or reveal inconsistencies.
And the most iconic one has to be Schrödinger's cat.
Erwin Schrödinger, 1935. He cooked this up not because he liked the idea, but to show how weird quantum mechanics seemed when applied to everyday objects.
The setup involves a cat in a box.
A sealed box, yeah. Inside with the cat is a radioactive atom, a Geiger counter, a hammer, and a vial of poison gas. If the atom decays, a random quantum event, the Geiger counter detects it, triggers the hammer, smashes the vial and the cat. Well,
Not good for the cat.
not good. But according to quantum mechanics, before you observe it, the atom is in a superposition. It's both decayed and not decayed simultaneously. Schrödinger asked, does that mean the cat, whose fate is linked to the atom, is also in a superposition, simultaneously alive and dead until someone opens the box?
He meant it as a paradox, right, to show the absurdity.
Exactly. He thought it was ridiculous to think a cat could be both alive and dead. It highlights the measurement problem. How and when does a quantum possibility collapse into a single definite reality? What counts as an observation?
But the image stuck. It's become shorthand for quantum weirdness.
Totally. And while no cats were harmed, scientists now actually create analogous cat states with microscopic and even larger systems in labs, testing the boundary between the quantum and classical worlds. It's a brilliant illustration of a deep conceptual problem in physics.
Okay, another physics one? Maxwell's demon. This one seemed to break a fundamental law.
James Clerk Maxwell, 1867. He was thinking about the second law of thermodynamics, the one that says entropy, disorder, always increases in a closed system. Things tend to run down, mix together.
Right. Heat flows from hot to cold. not the other way around spontaneously.
Maxwell imagined a tiny, intelligent demon guarding a frictionless door between two chambers of gas at the same temperature. This demon can see individual molecules and their speeds. It cleverly opens and shuts the door to let only fast, hot molecules go into one chamber and slow, cold molecules into the other.
So over time, it could create a temperature difference, one hot side, one cold side.
Yes, seemingly without doing any work itself, just by sorting. That would decrease entropy locally, violating the second law. It looked like it could lead to a perpetual motion machine.
So what was the solution? You can't actually break the second law.
It took a long time to figure out. The resolution, largely solidified by physicists like Leo Szilard and later Rolf Landauer, involves the demon's information processing. To know which molecules are fast or slow, the demon has to gather information, store it, and eventually erase it to make room for new information. The act of erasing information, it turns out, necessarily increases entropy elsewhere, balancing the books and saving the second law.
Wow, so the demon's thinking has a physical cost related to entropy.
Essentially, yes. It revealed a profound link between thermodynamics and information theory. It's not just a curiosity, it has implications for the limits of computation. A fantastic example of a thought experiment driving physics forward for over a century.
Let's go back further. Galileo and falling objects.
A classic example of pure logical reasoning dismantling an ancient belief. Aristotle had taught for nearly 2,000 years that heavier objects fall faster than lighter ones. Seems intuitive, right?
Yeah, a cannonball feels like it would fall faster than a feather.
Galileo challenged this with the simple thought experiment. Imagine dropping a heavy cannonball and a lighter musket ball. Now imagine tying them together with a rope. What happens?
Well,
According to Aristotle, the lighter musket ball should act like a drag, slowing the cannonball down. So the tied pair should fall slower than the cannonball alone.
okay, makes sense by that logic.
But the tied pair is now heavier than the cannonball alone. So, according to the same Aristotelian rule, the combined object should fall faster than the cannonball alone.
Wait, it can't fall both slower and faster.
Exactly. It's a logical contradiction. Galileo pointed out the only way to resolve the contradiction is to reject the initial assumption. The weight doesn't determine the speed, ignoring air resistance. All objects fall at the same rate.
That's brilliant. Just pure logic. Whether he did the Pisa experiment or not, the thought experiment is the key.
It really is. It marks a shift towards testing ideas with reason and consistency, not just accepting authority. And of course, astronauts famously confirmed it on the moon, dropping a hammer and feather. They hit the ground at the same time.
And then there's Einstein.
Yeah.
He basically built his theories on thought experiments.
He was the master. Special relativity came from him imagining as a teenager what it would be like to ride alongside a beam of light. If light appeared stationary, it would violate known laws of electromagnetism.
So he had to rethink space and time themselves to keep the speed of light constant for everyone.
Right. Leading to time dilation, length contraction, all sorts of counterintuitive stuff derived from that initial what if. And general relativity, his theory of gravity, that came from imagining someone in a free-falling elevator.
How did that help?
He realized that inside the falling elevator, you'd feel weightless, just like in space, far from gravity. And light beams would appear to bend. This led to the equivalence principle that gravity is indistinguishable from acceleration, and ultimately to the idea of gravity as the curvature of space-time.
Imagination really was his superpower.
He famously said imagination is more important than knowledge. His work is the ultimate proof of how powerful purely mental exploration can be in science, often predicting things later confirmed by experiment.
Okay, last category. Decision and game theory. Analyzing choices, strategy, rationality.
Yeah, these often involve scenarios where your outcome depends on what someone else chooses, highlighting dilemmas of trust, cooperation, and risk.
And the undisputed champion here is the prisoner's dilemma.
Developed in the 1950s, the classic setup. Two partners in crime are arrested, put in separate interrogation rooms, they can't communicate.
The police offer each one a deal.
Right. If you confess defect and implicate your partner, and they stay silent, cooperate, you go free and they get a long sentence. If you both confess, you both get a medium sentence. If you both stay silent, you both get a short sentence.
So what's the dilemma?
From your individual perspective, confessing looks like the best bet, no matter what your partner does. If they stay silent, confessing gets you freedom instead of a short sentence. If they confess, confessing gets you a medium sentence instead of a long one. It's the dominant strategy.
If both prisoners follow that rational individual logic and confess,
They both end up with a medium sentence, which is worse for both of them than if they had both stayed silent and gotten the short sentence.
So individual rationality leads to a collectively worse outcome.
Precisely. It captures the tragedy of situations where cooperation would be best for everyone, but lack of trust or fear of being exploited leads everyone to act selfishly, making everyone worse off. It's used to model everything from arms races to environmental pacts to office politics,
It shows why trust and communication are so crucial.
or sometimes enforcement mechanisms or repeated interactions where reputation matters. It's a simple setup with incredibly deep implications for social science.
Now for a really weird one. Newcomb's paradox. This involves prediction.
William Newcomb thought this up, Robert Nozick wrote about it. Imagine a super intelligent predictor, someone who is almost perfectly accurate at predicting your choices.
Okay, like 99.9% accurate.
Let's say the predictor presents you with two boxes. Box B is clear, you can see $1,000 inside. Box A is opaque. It contains either $1 million or nothing.
My choice.
You can either take both boxes two boxing or take only box A one boxing. Here's the catch. The predictor already made a prediction about your choice yesterday. If they predicted you would be greedy and take both boxes, they put nothing in box A. If they predicted you would take only box A, they put $1 million in box A.
Whoa. So the contents of box A depend on the prediction of the choice I'm about to make.
Seems like it. Now, what do? There are two strong arguments. Argument one. The predictor is almost always right. People who one box almost always walk away with $1 million. People who two box almost always walk away with just $1,000. So you should one box, trust the prediction.
Makes sense. Maximize expected winnings based on the predictor's track record.
But argument two says, wait a minute. The money is already in box A or it isn't. The predictor made their move yesterday. My choice now cannot possibly affect what's already inside the box. So whatever is in box A, either $0 or $1, taking box B as well will always give me an extra $1,000. Therefore, rationally, I should two box.
That also seems rational. It's about causality. My choice now can't change the past.
And that's the paradox. Two seemingly impeccable lines of reasoning lead to opposite actions. One focuses on evidence and expected utility, the other on causal principles. Philosophers still argue about it.
Does that have any real-world parallels?
Maybe in situations involving reputation. If people predict you'll be trustworthy, like a one-boxer, they might offer you valuable opportunities, the $1. If they predict you'll exploit them, like a two-boxer, maybe you lose out. It challenges simple models of rationality and hints at links with free will and determinism. It's a real mind-bender.
Okay, last one. Pascal's wager, applying betting logic to God.
Blaise Pascal, 17th century mathematician and philosopher. He wasn't trying to prove God exists, but arguing it's rational to bet on God's existence.
How does the wager work?
He frames it as a decision under uncertainty. Option 1, believe in God. If God exists, you gain infinite reward, heaven. If God doesn't exist, you have a finite loss. Maybe some earthly pleasures missed, time spent praying. Option 2, don't believe. If God exists, you suffer infinite loss, hell. If God doesn't exist, you have a finite gain, those earthly pleasures.
You compare infinite gain versus finite loss if you believe, and infinite loss versus finite gain if you don't.
Right. Pascal argued that because the potential payoff, heaven, and potential loss, hell, are infinite, any finite costs or benefits of belief-disbelief in this life become irrelevant in the calculation. The rational gambler, faced with a potential infinite win, should always take the bet, even if the odds seem low.
So, believe in God as a matter of pragmatic strategy.
That's the argument. It's an early form of decision theory. It gets criticized, of course, which God. Can you force belief? Is self-interested belief genuine faith? But the structure of the argument is interesting.
Yeah, we use similar logic sometimes, right? What have I got to lose?
Exactly. Might as well apply for that job. The worst they can say is no, but the upside is huge. Pascal applied that kind of cost-benefit analysis involving infinity to the biggest question imaginable. It reframes a metaphysical debate as a high-stakes gamble.
Wow, what a journey through these mental landscapes.
Yeah.
From trolleys to galaxies made of code.
It really shows the power and flexibility of thought experiments, doesn't it? They're like these mental tool sheds for taking apart complex ideas.
Mental sandboxes, you called them earlier. Safe places to play with dangerous or impossible ideas.
Yeah, and extract insights you couldn't get just by observing the world normally. They clarify, they challenge, they reveal hidden assumptions.
And they're not just academic games. We saw how they influence AI ethics, political philosophy, even physics.
They really do shape how we think and sometimes even what we discover. And I think part of their power is just how engaging they are. They pull you into the story.
They use our natural what-if instinct.
Exactly. And you see connections, right? Questioning reality in Plato's cave and the brain in a vat, pondering identity with the ship and the teleporter, thinking about totals versus individuals in the trolley problem and the utility monster.
They don't always give easy answers, do they?
Often the opposite. They show where our reasoning leads to puzzles or contradictions, forcing us to rethink our concepts. They sharpen our thinking by finding the edge cases.
So a final thought for everyone listening. Maybe try creating your own thought experiment. Take a problem you're struggling with or an idea you find confusing.
Yeah, could you boil it down to a simple, maybe slightly weird what-if scenario? Something that isolates the core issue or tests your assumptions.
Use that mental sandbox.
Your mind is an amazing laboratory. Keep asking what if. Keep experimenting. That's where so many breakthroughs start.
A great place to leave it. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into thought experiments.
Thanks for listening. Keep pondering.